It's fun to have a world where the rat people who exist are aliens, and your rat person has has an even stranger backstory.
That Drawk show.
Hello and welcome to the Drawk Show. Today I'm going to be talking to do you want to go by your Discord name or
No, but my real name's fine, mate.
real name? What was your real name again? So bad at that.
It's Zach.
Zach. We're talking to Zach about a rat. Drawing your character from this is Pathfinder 2, right?
Yes, it was a Pathfinder 2 character I played probably, 18 months ago, I suppose, until he met his unfortunate end.
Oh God, no! This one's died. This is an in memoriam.
He's not technically dead. I mean,
Uh,
undead's not dead, so I'm sure
Undead
we'll
is
get
definitely dead.
there.
I I feel like the only people that pitch it is not technically dead are necromancers.
Necromancers and liches.
Yeah, I am playing a game with a lich in the party right now, and he makes an extreme point to bring up that he's not dead when it's
Look,
convenient for him, when it gets him out of
exactly.
chores.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, if you're going to be a necromancer, what you're going to do that to
Oh,
not
angular
do as many
disc.
chores as humanly possible, surely.
I mean, that's why you did it. Otherwise, you wouldn't need all these extra bodies on hand.
Exactly. So I don't feel like doing the dishes. I'll just raise some undead minions and we'll get them to do it instead. Works for me.
It's that easy. So I immediately started drawing and then was like, no, this is a little rat. Rat deserves a real angular style. So we're gonna go intense with it.
Nice. No, I'm really excited to see what you come up with. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, hoping so. I mean, I love the design, and I also just so this is the third time I've had someone on to talk about their Pathfinder 2 character. All three have been maguses.
They're such a fun class. They really
They
are. I mean, okay, a little bit niche perhaps. They do
yeah,
one thing, but they do it incredibly well.
they do one thing, and that thing is hit hard once.
Yeah. I mean, I think. Pathfinder 2 people, the real Pathfinder 2 fans seem to get quite deep into their spreadsheets and all that sort of things, and
Oh my God. I
I mean, it's not for me, but if that's what you love, do it. And the Magus is always sort of number one or number two in sort of DPS output.
Yeah, I I think like I wouldn't call that the real fans, but it definitely is the way of engaging for like game mastery, like mastering things. But I don't know. It's the same thing as people who play Fire Emblem on Maddening. It's such an obsession with knowing all of the niche ins and outs of numbers that
Yeah.
I can't relate to that drive, you know?
No, look, I mean, for me, I mean, I've only been playing tabletop RPGs for 5 years. I got into it in 2018. And for me, it's always been a vehicle for storytelling
Oh, absolutely.
over everything else. But, there's no wrong way to play it. If you want to play a game with ridiculous damage numbers and highly optimized characters, go nuts. But for me, I've always thought it's more interesting to bring an interesting character to the table and then explore them and the way that they interact with the world and the other characters. For me, that's always been key.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. Sometimes I do enjoy pushing the limits of character creation, but for me, it's usually less about optimization and more about what fun, wacky thing can I make work.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where Pathfinder Second Edition shines.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
Because, if you want to build, I don't know, a skeleton druid, you can. It's all there. It's all baked into the rules. And I mean, with the whole open game license fiasco that's been taking place over the last couple of months, I think that there will be a lot more adherence to Pathfinder Second Edition. Maybe not First Edition. I think First Edition was a little clunky. Um,
Yeah,
but I think you're going to see a lot more people gravitating towards second edition simply because it is such an elegant system. It really is. It needs it almost needs no homebrew to make it balanced or to make it really, really engaging and fun.
Yeah, like I've added in the smallest bit of homebrew just for things that I like for balance to feel a bit more comfortable. But I really don't think they're necessary. For me, when I homebrew, it's more about like minimizing the need for optimization than it is about like actually fixing things. 5e, I add things in from like 6 different tabletop games when I play 5e.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, 5e is, and I think always will be, an amazing place for new people to tabletop RPGs. Um, because it's relatively streamlined for the player. The rules, certainly on the player side, are clear and concise and easy. But once you've been playing it for a few years and once you really start to understand it, it does get quite limiting. And for me, I'm generally the game master or dungeon master, and when I play, that's just the role that I gravitate towards. And there's so much in 5e that requires the dungeon master to make rulings on the fly or make up a rule or something like that, and over time it gets wearing. It really does.
I I think it does. There are advantages to the DM seat for 5e for sure, but like there's so little to help you. It doesn't help that I think it is one of the worst uses of challenge rating in a game.
Oh, I don't bother with challenge rating. What's the point? It doesn't really work.
Yeah,
I don't
like
think.
when I balance encounters for PF2, I just use the encounter builder. When I balance it for 5e, I have to calculate DPR for each of my players based off of AC and
Yeah.
actually do like spreadsheets to figure out if a boss fight will be a reasonable challenge.
That's too hard. That really is. I mean, if you live and work in that sort of tabletop RPG space, fine. But for the rest of us who have 9 to 5 Monday to Friday jobs and not necessarily a lot of time during those work hours to do things like encounter balancing and figuring that out, it's kind of left to you to do it in the moment at the table. To decide, okay, well, my I don't know, my Warforged fighter has just hit for like 64 damage and taken half of the boss's hit points. Now what do I do? Do I just hand wave it away? Or do I just all of a sudden give the boss a bunch more hit points? Yeah. I mean, I'm not coming down on fifth edition. I don't want anyone to think
Yeah,
that because it's the
it has
system
a
that I still
lot.
play mostly. But yeah, needs a bit of work.
But so I want to ask about your perspective on this because I know, in my experience, it ended up being worth it. How did you feel about the fact that while there is less onus on the GM in general, how did you deal with the need to learn a lot of rules before you could take advantage of those systems in PF2? Because I think there is a lot more groundwork for a GM in PF2 than 5e.
Yeah, I think yeah, Pathfinder Second Edition. I haven't done a lot of game mastering for that.
Mm.
It seems to me that it's one of those ones that's hard to learn but easy to master. Whereas Fifth Edition, again, just speaking in general terms, is more easy to learn, hard to master. So I think that once you've learned the base rules and things like healing, which sometimes seem a little bit counterintuitive, the dying condition versus the wounded condition and how that all interacts. Once you put in the time to really get to grips with those kinds of rules and systems, it's very intuitive. But looking at it just on the page, going, what the hell is this? I don't understand this at all. It's not intuitive at first glance, but once you know a little bit, then it starts to become a little more intuitive.
I think that's a very fair assessment. So, do you want to get into the story of this character a bit? Like, how did you come up with them? What's their backstory in game? What's their play like?
100%. So I don't know if yourself or any of the people watching have are familiar with the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. If you are, well then you'll understand what I say when I say that Lope is very much inspired by a character called the Lopen, who is, without getting too much into it, is a bit of comic relief in an otherwise very, very serious epic fantasy story. And in the audiobook version, he speaks with an Australian accent, which I always find endlessly hilarious as a New Zealander. The Australian accent is endlessly funny to me. So Lope
Is it?
came. Yeah,
It,
yeah,
it
nah,
is
yeah.
different, but is it different enough that it's immediately funny?
To a Kiwi or to an Australian, 100%. To
Okay.
anyone else in the world, the New Zealand and Australian accents sound very, very similar, and that is a fact that I find absolutely baffling. Um,
They are. Linguists say they're similar. They are similar.
they're 100%. They're very similar, but the key difference between the Aussie and Kiwi accents are the vowel sounds.
Yes.
Australians really emphasize the vowel sounds, the A, E, I, O, and U. Whereas New
Mhm.
Zealanders, we tend to not emphasize that so much. The classic line is always fish and chips, which
Yep.
is a standard takeaway meal in both New Zealand and Australia. New Zealanders will say fish and chips, whereas Australians will say fish and chips. That I sound is really harsh. Anyway, this isn't a linguistics lesson. Lope for me was a backup character. I was originally playing a alchemist who Lope featured quite a lot in my alchemist's backstory, and then my alchemist met an untimely end, and so that allowed me to bring Lope out. So Lope started his life in just as a normal rat. Nothing special at all. Spent, I don't know how long rats live, call it 6 months a year, living in sewers, doing ratty things, and was caught by the alchemist's rat catching terrier, and caught and wounded, which is why he has quite significant scarring on his face and only half a tail. My alchemist character, Dimitri, uh, saw this rat and sort of thought, oh, he's kind of cute. I'll just keep him around, and nursed him back to health and kept him as something of a pet. Along with being a pet, he was also something of a test subject for Dimitri's more outlandish alchemical
Some
experiments.
kind of lab rat.
You could say some sort of laboratory rat, 100%. Um, And so, over a number of years, Dimitri would test these concoctions upon Lope. And a lot of these concoctions being magical in nature, it's hard to quantify how these things would interact with one another. And over time, Lope became smarter, he grew, and eventually he developed self awareness and sapience. So, going from just a normal instinct driven rat to a full living, thinking, self-aware being, and continued to grow. Learned to walk on his hind legs only, so becoming a biped from a quadruped. Learning to speak and do basic little things. Now, in the world of Galarian, for Pathfinder, rat folk are a race. So no one thought that it was particularly unusual. And so Lope spent many years in sort of domestic bliss, I suppose you could call it, with Dimitri, um, uh, until, because they're an RPG character, there needs to be some sort of tragedy in the backstory,
Well,
otherwise it really
always.
can't. Um, and so a criminal gang moved into the neighborhood that Dimitri's shop was in, and they were running an extortion racket, an extortion and protection racket. And Dimitri, being relatively wealthy, would just pay them and just make them go away. Until one particular day, a group of enforcers for this gang turned up, and Dimitri didn't have the money on him to pay the protection for that week, and so was made an example of. Lope was out running some errands, finding some more unusual ingredients for some concoctions, and came back to find his essentially adopted father dying on the floor of a burning shop. And that was what gave him the drive to go out into the world, seek vengeance for his father, and just clean up a little bit. Clean up the streets, clean up the world, try and just stop bad things happening to good people, because he saw the hardship and the horror and the sadness that that sort of thing wrought. So definitely a chaotic good in terms of alignment. Um, and he linked up with as is sort of the standard for RPG parties. He linked up with an unlikely host of other people. I believe there was a fairy cleric, there was a goblin monk. I can't remember the other party members, which is slightly embarrassing. Um, and set off on adventures. Once he'd sort of cleaned up his hometown and got rid of the criminal gang, made them face his own particular brand of justice at the point of a rapier charged with electricity. And then, yeah, set out into the world to try and just make a difference.
Nice. I like that. I like it's fun to have a world where the rat people who exist are aliens and your rat person has has an even stranger backstory.
Look, it's something that's always fascinated me as a person is the question of what makes a person.
Okay.
What is humanity? What is self-awareness? What does that mean? And it's something that's always infatuated me. I mean, from the age of 5 until right now, and I'm 36 now, my favorite movie has been the 1986 underappreciated classic Short Circuit, which not that many people these days know of or remember, but it was about a military robot who got struck by lightning and gained sapience. Um, and the tagline for the film is "Life is not a malfunction." It's a wonderful movie, very 80s. I mean, we're talking Steve Guttenberg and Ali Sheedy. Yeah, we're talking the classic 80s cast, but it's a remarkable and fun movie. But that's always driven me, that idea of what is life? What does it mean to be alive? And my RPG characters tend to a greater or lesser degree, have that built into them in some way.
I think that's really interesting. The idea of having like a philosophical question as a guiding principle for how you design characters. It's not something I've really run into before. I think that's really cool, though, having a character where the entire point is there's a question you want to ask, and their mission is to answer it. It adds a really cool like fourth wall motivation.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, to me, RPG characters, you can make them as basic or as complex as you want, and that's the beauty of it. And there's no wrong answer. I've always had that opinion of, in tabletop RPGs, there's no wrong answer, no matter what. Um, so yeah, just having someone extraneous to you to be able to get other people's points of view on that same question. It's very interesting. It's very rewarding, and it's also very rewarding to play a rat who can teleport behind someone and then stab them with a spell. Uh, it can't all be serious. Yeah, you got to have some fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, there is no reason you can't have your philosophical debate about the nature of personhood from a teleporting rat.
Exactly. And I guess that kind of segues relatively nicely into the way that Lope as a player character plays. So um, Ratfolk as an ancestry, obvious. The class as a magus or magus or however you wish to pronounce it.
I usually go
Um,
magus.
yeah, magus. Um, and for the magus in Pathfinder gets a choice of subclass, which is known as a hybrid study.
Hmm.
And the one for Lope that I chose was it's just gone from my mind now. Not
Oh
Starlit
no,
Span. 1 second, hold on, as he quickly boots up Path
it's
Builder
not the
2E on his
toughness
phone.
one, I imagine.
No, no, no. It's oh, come on. This is ridiculous. Hold
It's not
on.
the one that uses a staff. Which?
No, no.
Oh,
Laughing Shadow. That's what it
oh,
is.
okay.
Laughing
That
Shadow.
I always forget
Uh,
that one.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't seem to be very popular, but it's a lot of fun to play. So their ability as a Laughing Shadow Mage is a short range teleport, which is always fun to for sneaking, for in Pathfinder in
Oh,
particular, is quite important for getting flanking and making someone flat-footed to your attack. Um,
short
so
range teleports are amazing. Like, find me the 5e caster that doesn't want to take Misty Step.
everyone loves Misty Step. It's a great spell. Um, and the advantage with using that in combat is, as a magus, you can't always use your main ability, which is the spell strike. One must then um, recharge it by casting what's called a conflux spell, which is the main sort of ability of your hybrid study. So Lope would generally, get in front of someone, make their spell strike, which is you would make a melee attack. If that attack hits, you then also get to cast a spell through your weapon, so you get weapon damage plus spell damage, which is almost always devastating. And the next turn would normally be then teleporting behind said enemy or teleporting away, which would then recharge the spell strike, so one could then use it again. It made it a particularly effective way at ending combat encounters quite quickly, especially with a single target, because you get two powerful spells and two relatively good weapon strikes in two attacks. It just coming back to that original point, as a damage dealer, the Magus is just phenomenal.
Yeah, they end up filling the space in combat where they feel like if you've taken all of what the marshals are, and taken out all of these survivability features they've been given and pump it
Yep.
into offensive power.
Yes. Yes, that is the downside of the Magus character, is they are very squishy. And I don't believe they can use medium or heavy armor without some heavy feat investments, which ends up not really being worth it. So you
Yeah.
want to have pretty high dexterity, pretty high intelligence, and I mean the rest you can almost treat as dump stats, really, especially strength. But because I generally like to play a face, I had a relative, well, Lope, I should say, had quite a high charisma score, so he could go in and be charming and diplomatic and charismatic as the situation required.
I like that as a build. I've seen mages played a few ways. I think because really realistically, all you need is a way of having armor class and intelligence. You see a lot of variety in people's take on it.
Yes, yes, and I mean, you can go with the inexorable iron hybrid study, which is all about survivability and toughness. It's such a versatile class in terms of build, not so much in terms of gameplay. You are very, very limited in your spell slots, and you don't have a lot of utility of spells that you might get out of a wizard or a sorcerer. But who doesn't love a Gish character? I mean, really, someone who can cast spells and hit something with a sword. What's not to love about that?
Well, and archetypes let you do that if you want to be someone who casts a little bit of spells for augment and
Hmm.
mostly be a warrior. But the magus really does let you feel like, at least for moments, a full spellcaster who is also a warrior.
Definitely, and that's for. I mean, I've been playing video game RPGs for decades now, and there's not that many that allow you to do like a spell sword type character. I mean, there's your all of your Elder Scrolls games will allow you to do that, obviously, but
But
some
they
of
allow
the
you to just, yeah, anything.
you could just do whatever you want in the Elder Scrolls, which is why I'm quite interested to see what Elder Scrolls 6 will end up being like. Considering that the phenomenon that Skyrim was. Um, uh, so in your more sort of traditional, your classic RPG kind of games, there's not really that kind of ability to play a hybrid character. So generally, I would go for a mage or a wizard or whatever spellcaster is available, because I like the pretty spell effects, and I find it just a little more interesting than going up and attack and attack and attack, and now it's dead and move on to the next one.
Yeah, I like the aesthetic of warrior so much more, but most games you have so much fewer options that it's just not as fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. yeah, there's not a lot of customizability, and it's why tabletop RPGs have been such a breath of fresh air into my gaming life, because previous to that, probably the best RPG I'd played would have been The Witcher 3. Amazing game. There's nothing around that. But you can't pick up a stool and bludgeon the bartender with it if you wanted. The sheer restrictions, they're just kind of built into the system because your game designers can't think of everything. Whereas if you want to do that in a tabletop RPG, you can. There'll be consequences, of course, but you can still do it.
I think that freedom is what most people find so appealing when they start playing tabletop RPGs. Is just like the it's something that you don't realize you've been missing if you've just been playing video games at first.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to really understand like how much more freedom you could have when you're not limited by what someone can be ready for.
Exactly. In your standard RPG, all the NPCs are always in the same spot. So when you need to trot in after slaying monsters for a while, you go back to the same person who delivers the same line, and does the same thing. It's a zero kind of interaction. There's no interest there. You're not interested in who the shopkeeper is and all that sort of stuff. But in an RPG, if your adventurers leave town for a while and come back a few days later, maybe the shop's closed, maybe the shopkeeper's on holiday, maybe the apprentice is running it for a little while. It just adds a huge amount of what's the word I'm looking for? It adds an extra dimension of things being dynamic rather than being a static world, which most video game RPGs tend to be. Less so in MMOs, but I don't play MMOs anymore. I had a pretty crippling World of Warcraft addiction when it first came out, so I don't do MMOs anymore, not really.
Valid. I think you bring up something that I haven't really thought about before, which is just that like that ability to make the world act separately from the players and not need to be universally ready for them at all times makes, weirdly enough, I think is why tabletop RPGs, I think, do a better job at creating that feeling of importance that you want from games, where you feel like you can matter, because it doesn't feel like the world is bending down to make you matter. Like it's not doing everything it can to make you important. You just end up being important in a world that doesn't wait for you.
And I think that's a critical point, is that the world's not going to wait for you. The big bad evil guy is not just going to sit in their Tower of Doom on their skull throne, sitting around drumming their fingers on the armrest of the skull throne, waiting for the player characters to turn up. If the player characters decide, no, we're going to go and do something else, well, the big bad's still going to go on with their plans. The world is dynamic; it's not static. And I think it's something that I've gotten into a little bit recently is the world of artificial intelligence, and I think that is going to, not overnight, I'm talking 5-10 years in the future, we're going to see some remarkable things happen in the game space, with games being overseen, I suppose, by artificial intelligences, which will be a very, very, very interesting development, I think.
I stay back from any prediction about AI because I had some, and then I started to realize everyone I knew who knew a lot about AI and about predicting what it could be used for and how it'll be used for, all had entirely different opinions than each other.
Well, I think that's the thing, it's going to be eventually, you can make kind of whatever predictions you want about artificial intelligence, but at the base level, it's going to be disruptive to all sorts. In the same way that the wheel or the steam engine was disruptive to multiple industries. Personally, I think it's going to be for the better. I think. Yeah, well, I hope so too. I hope we don't end up with Skynet. I don't think we will, but that's always on the table.
I think creating something with that much power in general, it'd just be impossible to know that it's going to end well.
Mm, mm. But yeah, yeah.
Okay. So what are some of your favorite like moments that you've had playing this character? Like, what are some of the story beats that have been really significant for you?
Hmm. Probably the most significant. Well, there would be two major definitive events in Lope's life. Three, sorry, I should say. Um, the first was he met at quite a low level. He met a blue dragon,
Ooh.
and a friendly blue dragon, which was interesting. Who who really showed him that there's a lot out there, and you're really not prepared for that. Lope, above all, is confident almost to the point of arrogance. He's seen a lot of stuff, he's done a lot of stuff, and he's very, very confident in his abilities. And to be utterly humbled by something which is beyond his comprehension was huge, and it had a massive effect on him and on his personality. And not long after that, I think it was the next day or a couple of days afterwards, in terms of game time, there was a requirement to cross a raging river. Um, the owner, proprietor of the only ferry was a particularly surly fire giant, who Lope did not gel with at all. Um, and if Lope got the crap kicked out of him. He
Oh,
got absolutely mangled, lost his arm.
oh, that's
By
where the
the
robot arm comes from.
That's where the robot arm comes from. And that was a real 1-2 punch to his self confidence. And that began a quest for him to gain more power, to become stronger, whatever the cost. Which is, it alienated him a little bit from his traveling companions. He didn't have any family left, so there was no one there to alienate, but he became more withdrawn, more thoughtful, more ruthless. And it ultimately culminated in his end, when he was approached by a being, a deity, and offered essentially unlimited power. And that was a really, really neat moment at the table where all the other player characters were saying, "Don't do it, Lope. We know you, we love you. This isn't who you are." And Lope making that decision of, no, power is more important than friends. And it was this wonderful, tragic story arc, to go from this young, naive, hopeful, want to go out and do good for the world rat to a jaded, almost broken individual who would do anything for more power. And that was a really, really interesting character arc to play out. It was quite emotional, actually. That session. It was when he finally accepted the power to begin his journey to becoming a lich. It was actually quite. It was probably one of my favorite moments at a tabletop RPG. It really was.
Makes sense. It sounds really dramatic and heartfelt, and I think people don't
Hmm.
play into negative arcs very often when they're thinking about their character and how they progress.
Well, it was never really. I mean, it certainly wasn't planned out, that
Mm.
it would go that way. I ultimately sort of thought when I was planning out the character that he would continue being a happy-go-lucky good guy with a quip for everything. But I just had this neat opportunity to go, what about if he turns into a bad guy? Um, and ultimately, I believe I don't play with that group anymore. I moved away, so I wasn't able to continue.
Oh,
Um, I,
damn.
I believe now that Lope is the big bad evil guy for their campaign, which I just love. I love that so much.
That is very fun.
Yeah, yeah. It's really cool. I had the GM message me a couple of months ago saying, "Hey, we're sort of doing this in our game now. are you happy for me to use Lope as the bad guy? And I just went back saying, hell yes, that's amazing. I'll even join in via Discord and be a guest NPC for you if you want on a few occasions.
Oh,
Um,
that's great.
yeah. Because so often you see redemption stories, not often you see it the other way around.
A corruption story, the
Yeah,
villain's journey.
yeah. You don't often see that. You really don't, and it was a lot of fun. It really was.
I mean, obviously, the hero's journey being described as the monomyth is wrong, but it is common in fantasy, and I think you can actually look at a lot of the beats you've mentioned as like a dark mirror to the traditional hero's journey.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Normally you'll have a story born out of tragedy and the hero overcoming the tragedy and everyone lives happily ever after with sunshine and rainbows. But um, the ability to really twist that trope was it was almost a requirement. I think I was like, no, I have to do this. I have to see what this is like, and I have to say, I really, really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. It sounds like you had a good party that you could trust to be able to tell the story that like complex with.
I was quite lucky. I was actually playing that group with there were a couple of guys who I went to school with who I hadn't spoken to for probably the best part of 10 years.
Oh,
Um, and we just reconnected. I can't remember how. I think it was via Facebook or something like that. And I mentioned that I was into RPGs, and they said, "Oh, we've always wanted to try that. Do you want to come and run a game for us?" And I said, "Sure, why not? I'll do that." So I ran a couple of games for them. They got into it. Then one of the guys said, "Oh, I've been learning about this Pathfinder, and I really want to try being the dungeon master." I said, "Go ahead. I relish the opportunity to play." And so it started. I think we probably played for the best part of 2 years. I think in the same campaign. Um, Multiple player character deaths and tragic moments and heartfelt moments. It was fantastic, and we grew closer together as friends as well in the bargain.
that's awesome to hear. So it
Mm.
sounds like you like just happenstance brought you to this really awesome group that you're able to tell a very complicated and interesting story with. That's really lucky.
Very lucky. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I play a couple of campaigns at the moment with just random people that I found off of Discord and Facebook and all that sort of stuff because I only play tabletop RPGs in person. I did it through necessity, through the pandemic and all that sort of stuff, but it's just it pales in comparison to actually being able to sit around the table and everyone feed off of each other's energy, and you just lose so much of that when it's impersonal on a computer screen. You really do. Um, and so yeah, so there's a real difference in having a group that is composed of people who already know each other versus people who are just getting to know each other. It's very, very interesting, a very different dynamic.
I I think that makes a lot of sense. That would be such a different experience, especially if you were used to people who you were telling these very like atypical like stories where there has to be a lot of trust to be able to tell a story like that.
Mm, absolutely.
Like that, because that's the part for me that is so interesting. Like it's such a cool story, but it's so atypical that I feel like you really need to very much trust the people you're playing with to be able to do something like that.
You do. You do need that level of trust, and that only comes with time. That only comes with time and continual interactions with these people, both in and out of game. Um, I mean, one of my other hobbies is amateur theatre. So getting out and sitting at a table, rolling plastic dice and putting on silly accents—that's my jam. I love that. And it's one of the first things that I work on for a character is the voice. Um,
I
and
if you're gonna say that, I gotta hear the Lope voice after this. By the way, putting a bookmark in that.
Okay, absolutely. And so I mean, for me, when I build a character, I kind of build a character and figure out who they are and their backstory and everything. And then number two on the list, before I even start rolling stats, is what do they sound like? What are their mannerisms? What do they do what inspiration am I going to draw from this? I have a relatively long commute, so I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and that is a wonderful source of inspiration for character voices and that sort of stuff. So for Lope, I took inspiration from Michael Kramer and, like I said before, the Stormlight Archive. And so Lope's voice was really quite, sort of high pitched and, a little bit all over the show. Like, right, Agon, we're going to go over there and do that? Sweet. Don't you worry, Lope will have you sorted. No sweat, mate. And he'd go around. Oh,
God, I love it.
And really, kind of pitch the voice up a little bit and bring the cadence to be all over the show, and sort of try and reflect the fact that he's still a rat, still, a rodent, ultimately a prey creature, and, bringing around that twitchy sort of nature, after a long rest or after a night round the campfire, he was always first up. Right, come on everyone, what are we doing today? We're going over there? Right, I'll break down the camp. Mate, you go start the fire up. And then once I've broken down the camp, then we'll go get some food, get some brekkie, and then we'll get on. We'll go. We'll do it. And he was I think
oh my God. I love that. That is such a no, I mean, it makes sense, you do theater, but that is such a charming character. I'm immediately so
Thank you.
I'm more sad that he's a villain, although I'm happy because it means I had a reason to keep adding shadows to this, and it's making it look cooler.
And I think, especially with a medium like RPGs where it is almost entirely the story is brought over via talking, it's important to have a voice that suits your character. There's another of my... so I currently DM for one group and I play... in another group, and it's a 5e group that I play a lizard folk artificer, who we're not talking about this evening, this afternoon, I should say.
But you can bring it up as much as you want. Oh, I'm going to real quick say to Pip in chat, we're drawing a magical rat.
Yeah, magical rat called Lope, Pip.
Yeah.
And so I play this other lizard folk character, and it was a comment a friend of mine who's been in the RPG space for longer than I have. He said that in his experience, people who are mostly DMs always go for the monstrous races. You'll very rarely find a DM playing a human fighter or an elven wizard. They almost always go for the more monstrous kind of races. But I built this battlesmith artificer with the criminal background. The charlatan background, not criminal. But instead of your typical sort of, person running a find the lady game, he was a bent accountant. He was a crooked accountant.
Oh my God, I love that. That's so good. Wait, before you keep going, instead you get to pick something to be a symbol of like your alternate identity. Was yours like an alternate tax code or like a fake offshore account?
It was a really big, heavy black accounting ledger.
That just had like fake papers.
Yep. What he would do before he became an adventurer was he would be a traveling accountant, and he would wander around small villages and towns and help small businesses get their paperwork in order. But he would always be skimming off the top and off the sides to make sure that he made a tidy profit. And his name is Bayrak, and he speaks with a heavy Scottish drawl, with a little bit of hiss in there to sort of to show the lizard folk background.
Okay. And this is an accountant?
As an accountant, yes. With being
a Scottish lizard accountant.
Aren't RPGs the best? And
if I finish this as fast as it looks like I might, I'm going to quickly draw a Scottish lizard accountant just so I can do that.
And of course, being a battlesmith, you get the steel defender, which can be in whatever shape you want. So of course, I chose a capybara because.
What? Why is that? Of course.
Why not? You could have a dog or a cat or whatever. No,
why
capybara.
Not, and of course are such different phrases.
It can be in whatever shape you want, so why not have something weird? Why not have a badger or a capybara or something? But the voice that I gave to Bayrak, like I said, was this heavy Scottish sort of drawl, and you would sort of speak a little bit like this, with a
Oh
bit
my
of a
god.
hiss in the background, so you
I am
knew it was
copying this
this.
voice for an NPC. Holy
Oh,
shit.
by all means, man, do it. You can use whatever you want. So for
That's so
me,
good.
for me, and I know that not everyone shares this opinion, and that's their right. But for me, the voice makes the character, not the other way
Okay.
around. I think it's so important because that's how you're conveying everything about this character is through their actions and ultimately through how they
Interesting.
speak. Um, and yeah, for me, it's really really important to be able to get into a character to be able to figure out their voice and how they talk and their tics and all that sort of stuff.
That makes a lot of sense. I've definitely heard other opinions, but I think especially if you're with a background in theater, it makes sense that the performing aspect would be where you feel it's most important to find the character because that's the theater is performance. All you have for a character is performance. You can't tell the
Yeah.
audience a backstory. So I think it makes a lot of sense with that being your background, where you'd find character.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, it is just an opinion, and it's not right and it's not wrong. That's just how I feel about the whole thing. I feel it's very very important. Um, and as a DM or a game master, it's important to manage the expectations of your group of players, of your party. So I tend to try and play with people who have the same opinion that I do. So there's always a variety of accents and different ways of talking at my table. It makes it a lot of fun. It really does.
I can imagine. It sounds like it'd be a blast.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it definitely is. I'm just watching the stream out of the corner of my eye. I'm really liking how this is turning out. It looks fantastic. It looks very anime.
Yeah, that's that. Well, I mean, the Magus is the anime class. Like they straight up put Demon Slayer references in it because that's what was big at the time.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I didn't know. I'm not big into anime, but I love this style. It looks fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I'm going for something very like high contrast, and the pose
Mm.
is definitely the most anime thing. I don't know, something about like a magus who can teleport behind you.
Yep.
I like aside from it being a rat, you
Mm.
don't not being into anime is very
Mhm.
funny because you've made the most anime character. Like you do the teleport behind
Mm.
nothing personnel kid move.
I mean, look, I was big into anime sort of in the early 2000s.
Mm.
Um, that's when I was big into it. So the modern animes I don't watch a lot of, but I will still go back and I will still watch Ghost in the Shell standalone complex. Trigun is still my absolute favorite anime of all
Gotta go
time.
back and watch Trigun. I've heard such
Oh,
good things.
it's so good. And the original Hellsing, um, just wonderful, wonderful works of art. I've got a friend who's always trying to get me into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which I understand is meant to be very, very good, but I struggle to get into it. I don't know why.
I've had the
Uh,
same thing. I've tried to get into JoJo's a lot because I find the aesthetic so unique. A lot of
yeah.
mangaka come from a background where they did street fashion as one of their studies.
Okay.
But the mangaka for JoJo didn't do street fashion ever, but they were a professional in high fashion, which is why it has such a unique look.
Ah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
but I haven't been able to get into it, even though I find that so appealing. But like
Yeah.
Eiichiro Oda, who does One Piece, Kira Toriyama did car design and street fashion.
Mm.
A ton of mangaka have done history in street fashion, and you can kind
Okay.
of see the ones who don't because it's not that their stuff has lack of style. Like it's not really that it looks bad. It's just there's a lack of drip. So like
Mm.
My Hero Academia lacks drip.
Mm.
The designs
Okay.
aren't bad; they're just not drippy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They don't have that real outstanding kind of look at me sort of fashion.
Yeah,
Um, interesting, interesting. Yeah, no, I will freely admit that anime has left me behind. Um, and
well,
I think so many of them are so um, they're so long. You know,
yeah.
trying to get into One Piece. That's what, 200 or 300 episodes, and
Oh no, my man,
it,
it's past 1,000.
oh Christ on a bike, really?
Okay,
That's too much.
it's
That's too much for
it.
me.
I this isn't a stream about One Piece. I am. It's about you. I will say, I understand not wanting to get into One Piece. I will
Mm,
promise you, it's worth it.
yeah.
There's a reason it's as long as it is. Because tell me something else that has been releasing regularly for 25 years straight, and
Mm,
there's no point where the fans will say, "Yeah, it kind of went downhill after this." The
mm.
consensus is it has just gotten better.
See, that's remarkable. That is
It's
absolutely remarkable.
insane. It is
I mean,
truly the fantasy epic of our age. Like, and
yeah.
I know he has designed it to look such a way that if you say that, you seem like you have bad opinions, but I promise it's true.
I honestly, I don't have time.
Fair,
Like I said,
fair.
I work Monday to Friday, 8 till 5. My commute is, 45 minutes to an hour each way. I get home and I'm like, oh God, I don't have the energy to start watching something that has over a
Oh,
thousand episodes
100%.
and it's still releasing now. It's like, I can never
Yes.
catch up to this. This is impossible.
Hey, at the very least, it is closing in on the ending finally. Probably like
Oh
five
my
more
God.
years or so.
But you're right. I mean, I don't think. I guess with the exception of maybe some soap operas, and things like Coronation Street and The
Hmm.
Young and the Restless, there's very very few things that continue going for 25 plus or 20 plus years without the fans saying, "Well, the first 10 seasons were great, but everything else has been trash."
Hmm.
You look at the
Now,
likes of The Simpsons or Family Guy,
yeah.
um, both of which have been going for. I mean, The Simpsons has been going for as long as I've been alive, almost. Um, and the new episodes they're not a patch on what they were. I know that's a very controversial take.
Yeah.
Um,
Ooh. Yeah, and it's not even when people say that, they're not even saying like the writers are clearly still trying. It's just like
yeah,
it's not as good. That's
yeah.
just the way it is.
And how can it be when something again? I'm speaking from a point of ignorance in terms of One Piece, but I can only assume again it's a very dynamic world. Things change all the time, whereas The Simpsons very static. Nothing ever changes in The Simpsons.
I mean,
Everything is always reset at the end of an episode. There's been no lingering changes in the world at all.
I will say, if you're ever curious about One Piece, don't watch it because the anime, as much as it's very appealing at times, it's not a
Hmm.
very good adaptation in a
Okay.
lot of ways, even though it can be beautiful. It's faster and better to read.
Right. Right. Okay.
If
Okay.
you're ever curious enough, I don't push it as much as it's my favorite thing of all my favorite media there's ever been. But no, it is hard to get into these days. A lot of the bigger stuff. If
Mm.
you are trying to just think about getting into anime, like checking out what's been going on, Chainsaw Man is insanely good. They hired some of the industry greats. It's only one season so far, and that
Okay.
season I think is like 12 episodes.
All right. Chainsaw
And
Man. I like the sound of it
Chainsaw Man.
already.
There are industry legends working on it. It's a very bizarre series, but incredibly well produced.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. But it's funny how to see from my own point of view how one's tastes change over the years. You know,
Absolutely.
my tastes for whatever it was when I was in my 20s are very very different now that I'm closer to 40 than 30, which is a frankly terrifying thought. Yeah, I'll happily sit down and watch. I got very excited the other day because the second season of Clarkson's Farm came out, which is, if you've not seen it, it's a wonderful show. I love it to pieces because I'm a big fan of Jeremy Clarkson. Um, but
No idea what that is, who that is, what that is.
have you ever heard of the show Top Gear?
Yes, I have.
Yes.
I am aware of Top Gear.
So one of the main presenters, Jeremy Clarkson of Top Gear, Jeremy Clarkson, he was fired from Top Gear from punching someone. He
Oh,
then
what
went
a
to
baller reason to get fired! Did they deserve
yeah.
it? Were they being a dick?
No, not really, not
Oh
really.
no!
Um, so he got fired from that and then went to work for Amazon. And one of the other projects that he has pitched to Amazon that they've picked up is that he owns a farm. and has done for a long time. And the show was pitched that, well, what if I just did all the farming? And it is incredibly funny, but one does have to be a bit of a Clarkson fan to sort of understand the humor behind it,
Yeah.
because he's portrayed as a bumbling idiot, basically, and watching him try to run a farm is just intensely funny. Um,
God, what a British reason to get fired.
it really
They
is.
would.
It really is. Yeah, yeah. He punched a producer, I believe. Um,
Oh God, it's so
hmm.
British to do that and to fire someone for it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. An American show, you'd be like, don't worry about it, it's fine. Yeah, no,
It just depends on who you punch, but yeah. Oh God,
true,
that's
very
great.
true.
What a
But your tastes change. And I watch a lot more sort of real life kind of stuff rather than animated, much more than I used to. And I don't know if that's simply a function of getting older, or it's just a particular phase that I'm sort of in at the moment. But I watch very little animated stuff anymore,
fair.
um, which is a shame because there's so many good animated shows out there that are specifically designed for kids who grew up in the 80s on you know those extended toy commercials that were GI Joe and Thundercat
Yup.
and Transformers in particular for me. Um, Looking back on those now, it's like, wow, that was blatant, guys. You're just advertising toys. That's all you're doing, and it
That's the
worked.
entire goal.
Yeah, yeah, and it worked. I have so many old Transformers from the 80s locked away in my basement. I mean the toys. I haven't actually captured Bumblebee and locked him away in my basement. That'd be a crime. Um, but no, it's very interesting. It really is. But I think one thing that will likely stick with me for a long time will be my love of tabletop RPGs, because
Oh, absolutely.
simply for the fact of what you can do with them. You can do just about anything.
Well,
And
if your perspective on them isn't about pushing mechanics, it's about telling stories with your friends, those stories can change as your tastes change.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And they're when I first looked into it, I thought, wow, well, you've got Dungeons and Dragons, and that's about it. No, there's so many. There are hundreds and hundreds of different systems out there. It would almost be impossible to catch up with just the sheer number that's out there.
Something of a thought here. If you've used to really enjoy animation, I think you're actually in kind of a cool place because you really can, if you want to start to get into animated stuff again, just take your pick. Look at what the really good stuff is that appeals to your sensibilities. Like,
Yeah.
because not being part of a genre's community kind of puts you in the position of getting to pick your engagement exactly when you do want to engage with it.
It really does. You can kind of go in with no preconceived notions. Um,
Hmm.
are there any? Because I'm big into science fiction, which unfortunately is something that is kind of had its renaissance in sort of
Yeah, the
with
Renaissance is kind of come
it,
and gone.
it has. I mean, you had all sorts of stuff in the
Ooh,
early 2000s, and then in the more recently you had Seth MacFarlane's love letter to Star Trek, which was the Orville. Um, but other than that, there hasn't really been much out there. Is there any decent sci-fi anime
oh
that's
my.
big out there at the moment?
There was one I just heard about, but I can't remember what it's called at all.
Okay,
Um, God, the closest thing I can think of, and it's sci-fi in the loosest sense because it more uses a near magic level technology to
right.
be a parable about science as Dr. Stone, but I don't, that's not,
Okay,
it's not sci-fi. It's
right.
about science, not science
Ooh,
fiction, if that makes
ooh.
sense.
Okay, yeah, no, that sounds it. Doctor Stone. I'll have to look that up.
It's a strange one.
Hmm.
God, yeah, it's interesting. It's about basically everyone in the world gets petrified by a flash of light somehow, and a genius boy wakes up from the stone in the future and is explaining the scientific processes of rebuilding civilization as he goes. It's
That sounds like a bit of me. I
it's
like the sound of that.
it's really interesting, and I think like it's not it's not written quite as well as I want it to be for how much I love it sometimes, if that
Right.
makes any sense.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
at its best, it's incredible, and at its worst, it's kind of boring. But it's
Right.
also in this very weird space where
Mm.
if you're just watching the anime and you don't read the manga, you notice this less because it's been adapted through another filter. The
Right.
writer it's becoming more common to make manga the way that the West does with comic books, where you have a separate writer and an author instead of them needing to be the same person. Um,
Oh,
and
interesting.
the writer for it hired a dude who's this incredible artist, such a great artist. The only downside to his art is it's very horny.
Right. Okay. Very thirsty.
It's it's I it's hard to put in perspective how horny the art in Doctor Stone, at least the manga, can get. The
Mm.
anime tones it down to such an insane degree that like the fan service shots are almost a rarity.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's funny. That actually touches on something that I'm a bit. I don't know what the correct word is. Not irritated, but the number of D&D character art and concept that's out there that is so thirsty, and you know that both the person who conceived the art and the person who drew the art, they both need to go to horny jail. um it's just I find it kind of annoying. I really do.
I
It's like not every female D&D character needs to have a bare midriff and, fucking thigh high stockings or whatever. It's absurd, and it really
I
does annoy me.
I feel the same way. I feel like like I don't mind characters being sexy sometimes. I think it's fine, and I think if that's
Yeah.
part of the character, that's that's what it is. Like
Hmm.
sometimes people have sexuality as an important part of their personality. That is a
Yes.
thing about human beings.
Yes.
But it's excessive sometimes and so common. I mean,
Hmm.
if you check out in the portfolio chat the other day, I did one as balance where I just drew a very sexy fantasy man because look, if sexuality is going to be an important part of character design, sometimes
Have,
it should be men and women
have
because there are men who have sexuality as a large part of their personality.
exactly. Yeah, have both. It's just I just and I understand it's because the general demographic for tabletop RPGs is younger. You're talking your sort of 18 to 25 kind of demographic. Um, and I understand that is, it's a different demographic, and it's a different way of looking at the world and all that sort of stuff. And you're much hornier when you're 18 than you are when you're 36. That's just a fact. Um, but, I think, and I'm no prude, but I think it could use a little bit of toning down. Um,
No, I
but
agree for sure.
that's that. I'll get off my soapbox now, shall I?
No, I
Okay, I'll
think
get off my puritanical no D&D character should be sexy
I
soapbox.
I 100% agree. If you want a good example of a balance, I genuinely believe that a really good balance is struck by the staff at Magic the Gathering,
Mm,
where most of the women you'll see just look like women and are dressed in practical armor, and then
yep.
every once in a while there will be some lady in a chainmail bikini, or the time a French lady decided to draw Kiora with the widest hips I have seen on a piece of cardboard. Um, but for the most part, it's balanced, and
Yes.
there are also times that they sexualize men. Like
Mm.
Oko, Prince of Crowns, is one of the horniest looking pieces of art I've ever seen.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And I think the funny thing is with all of the blowback that Wizards of the Coast have had around the open gaming license thing, is that they are they make a game, but they are also an art factory. Wizards of
Oh
the Coast.
yeah, they
All of their
employ so
art
many
is
artists.
beautiful. It is just because I dabble in Magic the Gathering, um,
Mhm.
and I can just look at the cards and go, "Wow, that is beautiful." It could be simple as a swamp land card or a plains, and you look at it and go, "Wow, that's really nice." Someone has spent a lot of time and a lot of thought and a lot of effort on that piece of artwork. For most people to just completely ignore it. I think it's quite nice to be able to take that time and take that appreciation for the artists
Yeah.
when
Well, I mean,
when they're doing that more mundane stuff.
the change that Magic has done where they're doing lots of special full art lands tells me that they
Mhm.
realize a lot of players aren't ignoring lands and aren't ignoring the art, and that like how beautiful this is actually has always mattered to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Uh, Wizards has been doing a lot of shit lately, but with how many indie devs are switching to AI generated art, Magic the
Mm.
Gathering is bolstering the fantasy art industry at the moment.
Yeah, well, I guess that kind of loops back into our earlier sort of discussion about AI. And, AI art has come a long, long way in a very short period of time. I mean, I use Midjourney myself for a lot of campaign art.
I
Um,
I think like that to me is one of the most ethical uses of AI art. Like it's not anything commercial, and you aren't otherwise going to be able to have like that many character tokens for all your NPCs, especially when your players just go off script.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tend to use it for just uh, scenery shots, that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
that makes so
Um,
much sense.
yeah, I gave Midjourney a prompt. I think it was Verdun, excuse me, Verdun, but in Middle Earth. If you don't know, Verdun was a very famous battle in World War One in France. Um,
Oh, I recognize it for that, but I forget
mm,
which one. There's a
mm.
bunch of famous battles, but we're
There's
here mostly taught the ones that Canada did really good in.
Yeah, of course. Um, and so I just gave it this prompt, show me Verdun, but in Middle Earth. So to really weave that fantasy element through, and some of the artwork it came back with was staggeringly good. Um, and for someone like myself who doesn't necessarily have means to pay an artist for a bespoke piece of art, to be able to just throw that at an AI and have it produce something which is really quite striking is amazing. But I have to say, what you're producing here is I don't think any AI could ever do that. That's staggeringly good.
Oh, thank you. I mean that's something I like to do on the show is just try to do things very unique that I feel like wouldn't be done if not for the pressure of the format. I mean we're only an hour in. I usually go for 2 hours and I'm done. Do you want to talk about a lizard lawyer too?
Sure. If you give me a sec, I can probably find you a reference picture for Bayrak.
All right.
Because I
Lizard
do
accountant,
like.
not lawyer.
Yeah, yeah, because I do like to have my characters. I do like to have commissions done of them because, well,
Yeah.
I just do. Just got to
Oh, of
try and
course.
find it. It'll be in my Google Drive somewhere. Um,
Oh,
uh,
also, Pip earlier mentioned this. I forgot to say. Love, Death, and Robots has a bunch of sci-fi animated
yes,
shorts that are really cool.
yes. I am a big fan of Love, Death, and Robots. Especially the first season. The second season was also good. I think I think some of the choices that they made for the stories that they interpreted, there could have been some better ones out there. Um, but look, it was still fantastic. Oh yeah, keyboard. Where's B? Oh god. See, my desk isn't very big, so I've had to move everything around so that I can set up my webcam.
Oh, oh shoot! Looks like
Bayrak.
your webcam went off at some point.
Oh, did it?
Oh, there
No.
you are. Oh,
Oh,
you're
there we
back.
go.
Okay.
Okay, it's not in
I just
that.
looked over and you were gone, and then it came back.
I might have been moving forward.
Oh no, it
Bayrak.
was fully black.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
strange.
No clue why. That just happens probably. Oh,
Can't
one
find.
pin that I put in my mind I wanted to come back to is you are right that the Australians overemphasize vowels. I
Yes.
would say, having heard the way that Kiwis say deck and shed, that maybe a little bit more vowel emphasis could be used.
I have no comment.
You don't want to reply about your deck and shed?
You're completely right. You are 100% right. It's just yeah. I mean, to us, the way that the Australians say "deek" is incredibly funny. It never stops being
Look,
funny.
that's funny to everyone. I will say it's still funny. I
um,
also I find you guys have such you have all of the slang from Australia that makes sense. and didn't take a lot of the slang where I hear it and I'm like, that's no longer English.
Yes, I mean, there's Kiwis are notorious for shortening words.
Mhm.
Instead of service station, which gas station, we'll call it a servo. I'm just going to go down to the servo get some chips.
That's good.
That's
I like that.
yeah,
Effective language.
yeah. That's a perfectly normal Kiwi phrase. But yeah, look, it's hard to sort of identify slang when that's the language that you talk all the time.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
totally.
it's
Okay.
and it's only thrown into very sharp relief when you do travel, especially to the States. Going to the States is
Oh,
fantastic as a Kiwi because everyone loves you. As soon as you open your mouth, they're like, "Oh my god, are you from New Zealand? That's so amazing!" And it's
everyone
just
who watched Flight of the Conchords is obsessed to meet you.
it's very true. It is very very true. That is almost the first thing anyone says to you when you mention that you're from New Zealand. They say, "I love the Flight of the Conchords." Um, I'm
Look,
just
we do. It's good.
yeah. I love that everyone loves it. It's fantastic to see something produced from my tiny little country. I mean, there's 4.5, maybe 5 million people in the entire of New Zealand.
Oh my god, it's like a seventh of a Canada.
Yeah, it's tiny. And I mean, for me to drive, so I'm in the biggest city, which is Auckland. We've got about
Mhm.
1.7 million people, I think. And for me to drive to the capital, which is Wellington, which is pretty much dead center. It's right at the bottom of the North Island. That's an 8-hour drive. And for us, that's huge. It's like, I got to drive to Wellington. Maybe I should just fly instead. But then you look at somewhere like the States, or Canada. I assume I've not been to. Actually, no, I've been to Canada
Oh,
once.
Canada is
Um,
like, if it weren't for West Australia, I think it would be considered the most sparsely populated and low density developed nation in the world.
yeah. There's just not a lot that. Yeah, there's not a lot there apart from bears and beavers. I guess I don't know. I
A
should
lot
know.
of bears and beavers swimming in them.
Yeah, I mean, I should know. My best mate, he's married to a Canadian girl, so I should probably know more about Canada than I do.
Yeah, no
Um,
one knows about Canada. It's not an exciting country.
and that's the way you guys like it. Um, I see a lot of similarities between New Zealand and Canada in their
100%.
neighbours. I've always said that New Zealand is Australia's Canada. Um, you know,
I've said the same thing.
yeah, we have the same relationship with Australia that Canada does with the USA. Um, it's yeah. I don't know. Look, I've traveled relatively widely. Not a lot of Kiwis have, and I've seen a lot of parts of the world. And every time I come back, I go, you know what? We're really lucky here. This is the best place in the world.
I
Um,
I have a joke when I talk about like what's going to happen in the future and what countries are a cyberpunk dystopia, that New Zealand's the only country that'll just be kind of okay.
I think we'll probably be fine. We're a long way from anywhere. Um, I think we'll probably get a little bit of it, but I don't think that the Kiwi people would stand for that sort of thing. That being said, we're a very I mean, I can only speak in general terms. Kiwis tend to be pretty laid back, pretty chilled out, just kind of go with the flow type of people. That's just how we are, and whether that's a function of because we are so far away from everywhere. I mean, even to fly to Sydney is a 4-hour flight for us. Um, to get to San Francisco or LA, that's 16, 17, 18 hours on a plane. We are so remote.
Considerably isolated.
Yeah, yeah.
Just until you get me reference, I'm just going to keep drawing
Yeah,
a
I'm
dapper like Regency suit for this man. I guess no, there's no
sure.
late Renaissance because it has slashings, but a
Yeah,
dapper
yeah.
late Renaissance suit.
I'm searching through all my emails and all of my folders and stuff for a reference picture to send you. I know I've got one because I've got it. So I
Would
have
he?
Sorry,
Would
go on.
he ever wear a suit?
Um, would Bayrak ever wear a suit? If he really had to, yes. Otherwise, I think he would probably most likely wear his armor mostly. Um,
That makes sense. Armor is
yeah,
important.
it is. It is important, and
But
I
I've drawn
wish.
such a fun. I'm gonna finish this one anyways because it's funny.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I really wish I could find this bloody picture because I know I've got it because I have this picture printed out and on the wall of my office with all of the rest of my character commissions that I've had made.
Nice.
People walk into my office at work and they're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "That's Bayrak. That's one of my D&D characters." And then you see their eyes kind of glaze over as they stop listening.
What do you do for work? That because that brings so much context to that statement you've made.
So look, I work as a technical salesperson for a company that sells industrial and commercial disinfection systems. Um, it's a very very nerdy job that I love to pieces. Um, yeah, so I have an office. I sit on the phone most days, talking to people, answering emails, and yeah, I am lucky enough that I have a little wall in which I can put all of my commissions.
That makes sense. So that's
Yeah,
coworkers who are seeing this, not like a client.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Although
Okay.
clients come in as well,
Oh,
which is also entertaining.
I
Um,
do like the idea of your client coming in and they see your lizard accountant.
it wasn't Emma Southey Ray. Who the hell did one for Bayrak? Um, I will
For the
find it
time
for you.
being, I've drawn a very funny iguana in a suit.
I love it. I love it. If you really want to capture Bayrak, you'll also need to add a very 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 large sniper rifle. Um,
Oh God, yeah. Oh, does he get to do the cool anime thing where you just keep slapping things onto the gun?
oh yes, oh yeah,
Oh,
a
oh, that's the
hundred
best shit.
percent, a
That's
hundred
the
percent.
best. Oh fuck yeah.
Oh god damn it! I really
Nothing
wish
better than just slapping a bunch of shit on a gun so it does more and more cool sci-fi shit.
100. Oh, there's pressure gauges and all sorts of shit in there.
Oh my god,
Um,
yes.
where on earth? I know I've got it. It is in here somewhere. It's just in the
Somewhere.
terabytes and terabytes of
What
space that I have on my
I
computer.
have already done a drawing, so you know what? I'm good to just hang.
That will work just fine. That will work just fine for good old Bayrak. I like that he's got a briefcase. That's fantastic. Yep, that's perfect.
Need pressure gauges.
Oh shit! I know where I can find it. I know where I can find it. It'll be in my group chat with the rest of the group.
Oh, we figured it out. We know where it's hiding.
We figured it out. I can't tell you where the actual picture is, but it will be in my group chat with my current party. He said confidently.
He did. He did set it confidently.
Incredibly confidently. Now I just have to actually. Aha! Ha, 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 ha. There we go.
Aha!
I knew
Audience,
I'd
it's
find it
here.
somewhere. I knew I'd find it. What's the best way for me to get this to you?
Probably just Discord DM. I can have that open.
Oh, yeah, cool. Let's do that. Let's go on to here, direct messages, into there. Upload file, downloads. Boom, there we go. I knew I'd find it somewhere.
Ooh, oh, I love. Oh my god, that's such like a classic '80s fantasy look.
It really is. I wish I could remember who I asked to do that commission. It was someone I found off of Reddit. I wish I could give them credit, and I do apologize to them. But I cannot for the life of me remember who that was who got me that.
I'm gonna make a new layer so I can save this as it was, and let's get rid of this nice suit.
Ah, goodness me.
Red scarves.
Yeah, I have a thing for red cloaks. I think they're a nice distinguishing kind of thing, and it's nice to have continuity between characters as well.
Okay, so that is like an intentional between characters thing. Interesting.
Yeah. All of my characters, all of them have tattered red cloaks.
It's not all, but it is a common thing I use as well because it just looks sick as fuck.
Yeah, I mean, a red cloak is always going to stand out, and if it's a bit battered and sort of ripped and torn, that shows that they've seen some shit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna find this fella's Reddit username, just so I'm sure that I found it from Reddit. Because I feel that I should give them the credit.
Yeah, actually, if you want to post that in under media chat on the server, that way anyone who's in there can take a look at what I'm looking at.
Yeah, sure. I'll do that now. Media chat. Put that in there. Upload file. Here we go. God, technology is a wonderful thing.
Isn't it?
And it's something that we take for granted. I mean, I'm in New Zealand. It's 20 past 2 in the afternoon on Sunday, and effortlessly, I'm talking to yourself, who is in Canada, and another 5 people on the internet, and it's all just working without any hassles, worries, nothing like that. It's a remarkable time to be alive.
Yeah, didn't think about how crazy that is, but if you put we are incredibly far apart. I guess not as far apart as we could be, considering I'm on Western Canada. It's a big goddamn country, so if I was in the East, it'd be much farther.
Yeah.
But still, very far away to be having a seamless, legless conversation.
A seamless conversation where I can see you and you can see me. It's with all of the bad stuff that is kind of going on in the world. To be able to just take a step back and go and appreciate, wow, we can do some really cool shit that is so commonplace now.
You know what? I think that's a nice lesson to take. I also think it's fun that I finished drawing Lope so quickly that normally these ideas take a bit longer, but I'm just going to turn it back on a second. I don't know. I don't want to add anything to this. I just like it. I just think it's cool.
It looks amazing. It really does.
Thank you.
Can I have a copy of that, because that is
yeah. I always send people copies when I'm done.
That is going up on my office wall. That's awesome. Amazing. I love the anime kind of look, and Tristan, who is a fellow I work with, who is also big into D&D, and I found that out on the first day I worked there, because I've only been in this job a year. I'll be like, Tristan, look at this, and I'm showing. Oh, excuse me. Oh dear, we're getting an emergency alert on my phone.
Oh no.
We're in the path of a relatively large tropical cyclone that's meant to make landfall sometime this evening. So,
that's fun.
Yeah, it is what it is. It's the weather. There's not much I can do about that. Goodness me. That's fantastic. I still love the briefcase. I love the briefcase. Got a briefcase.
You said that's where he has his false identity.
That's where that's where he keeps all of the important accounting things. There's got to be a briefcase in there.
There's something I find very funny about a lizardfolk accountant, because in a lot of D&D lore, they are these very pragmatic to a fault people. So the idea of how an insanely over-the-top pragmatic accountant who is like, there is no fiscal purpose to be investing in this. You should not.
It's fun. It's because the charlatan background, it gives you a few things, but you can kind of do what you want with it. You don't have to be a street criminal. You don't have to be a con man. You could be a legitimate. You could be a lawyer. You could be a bent lawyer. You could be a crooked accountant. You can kind of take it and do what you want with it.
I love seeing the flexibility in it.
Yeah. There really is and I think it's one of the backgrounds that has a lot more flexibility in it, rather than some of the other ones, which are quite strict and structured. Haunted one or hermit or Gladiator in particular. It's like, oh well, I was a gladiator. That's
I
nice.
although
Um,
actually is Gladiator no, they did add that in, right? Because it wasn't originally, because I remember
no.
originally Entertainer felt like really flexible because you could run it as Gladiator.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, entertainer's fantastic. You could do whatever you want. You could be sitting on a sitting on the street drawing caricatures of people. You could do whatever you want in terms of just entertaining people.
Yeah.
But
Oh man.
to have actual gladiator there, just it's so restrictive and so limiting. Um,
Mm. I guess it's because people didn't like that it felt like they were getting non-combat things for being a gladiator. I don't know. Because gladiator was recommended
yeah,
as an option for entertainer, and that felt so
mm.
much more fun.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with and again with most RPGs really not I'm not going to single out D&D is
Mm.
most of the mechanical things are there for combat. And they're there to inform combat choices and that sort of stuff. You don't see a lot of utility kind of stuff in backgrounds and in class features. Um, it's all there to support that central combat pillar, which is fine because everyone loves combat. Well, most people love combat.
It's also
Um,
the thing that I think benefits most from ruling.
yes, yes, definitely, definitely. It's far easier to make rules for combat than it is for utility. Um, So I love how effortless you're making this drawing look. I'm
Oh,
just I'm watching the stream as we go, and it's just you make it look so very easy. I'm
oh,
quite
thank
envious.
you. It's been a lot of work,
I'll
and
bet.
I also I mean I'm trying to push myself, which is why before this I was doing a hangout working on a piece that I'm gonna be coming back to on stream bit by bit in between
Okay.
some studies I do for it. But I find I can't push myself to as high of heights as a lot of my peers, a lot of the people I know around me,
Okay.
but I can get more done more quickly than they can, which is why the stream format's built the way it is.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I mean, geez, to knock out that one of Lope in less than an hour is it kind of blows my mind a little bit. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I have an artistic bone in my body, but it's more around performance rather than creation of art. And I've always found it really interesting to watch people at their craft, artists in particular, because it's something that is really quite foreign to me in my experience. I can't draw for shit. Um,
Well, if you enjoy it, any guest I have on who I feel like I click with, I make them a role in my server called regular guest, which basically means anytime I do a casual stream, they're welcome to hang out. So if I do a casual stream where I have a goal in mind, like a specific thing I'm going to be talking about, I'll
mhm.
mention that. Like oftentimes it's things like Magic and Warhammer and D&D because that's what I like talking about. Uh, but you could just hop on anytime. I'm going to bump you up to
Yeah,
that role after the stream. And if you enjoy it, just feel free to tune in, let your friends know, because I mean,
yeah,
that's how
man.
the channel's going to grow.
Well, look, I mean, starting something that you're passionate about and starting from a small group and trying to grow it, that's hard work. I as I well know, I ran a D&D podcast briefly, an actual play podcast, which is sadly defunct now. It's was one of the victims of the pandemic. Um, and so yeah, I can empathize with just how difficult it is to try and grow um, something like this because it's tough work. It really is, and if it's something you're passionate about, then it does make it a little easier, makes it a little less taxing.
Oh
Um,
yeah, well, this conversation in particular, just like one of my favorite things when I used to work retail was talking to people
mm,
who were tourists or immigrants because I just love hearing about the rest of the world.
yeah,
So conversations like this are making it worthwhile on its own. Granted,
mm,
would I rather be more people? I mean, of course, that's just the same as this, but more.
yeah.
But yeah, conversations like this do make it worthwhile already.
Mm. Oh, yeah, yeah. And look, and if it's something that you enjoy doing, well, then, geez, spend a couple of hours on a, sorry, it'd be a Saturday for you. Spend a couple of hours on a Saturday to it, and you're increasing your skills as an artist, and everyone wins. Everyone really wins. I tended to use Facebook as a promotional tool, which I think was a big mistake because really only old people use Facebook now.
Yeah.
Which
Oh,
it is very much become an old person's sort of social network.
my thought was going to be Twitter, but it's
Mm.
really, really hard to get an account to catch without paying for Blue now.
Yeah, well, yes, that's yeah, I don't know much about Twitter. I don't tend to do a lot of social media stuff. I'm still a little old fashioned, prefer to have face to face conversations with people, but you can't do something like this face to face.
Unfortunately, not. I got to be looking at drawing.
Yeah, exactly. And Twitter is very much the big social network at the moment. It'd be interesting to see what comes after Twitter because
Well,
there'll be something.
I think for growing a platform, the biggest one right now is TikTok. But the problem is, I want like YouTube videos to just be a way of finding people for the stream because I think streaming is more what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And because of that, I prioritize. I mean, I don't zoom in for this reason. I've prioritized everything to be as functional as possible for streaming, which means it's very horizontal, so it wouldn't look good on TikTok.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there will always be the next big thing, though. It's gone
Oh,
from
certainly.
Bebo to MySpace to Facebook to Twitter being the biggest social media platform in the world, and that's not going to stop changing. Eventually, Facebook or Twitter will be defunct, much like Bebo and MySpace is now. There will always be the next bigger, brighter thing coming along to make a change, make a disruption.
I think the only reason we don't feel like that's the case is because you can't visualize what's coming next before you've seen it.
Well, because we're in it. We're in that space. And when you're in that sort of space, when you're in any kind of space, it always seems like, oh well, this is going to be the be all and end all. This will never change, but it does. Change is inevitable. It really is.
Go for a yellow tone here. So, just setting a color in the background so that I'm kind of adjusting everything to it.
Right.
It basically makes the colors a bit more cohesive.
Okay. Interesting. So what program and what hardware are you using to draw?
I'm using an Alienware gaming computer because it has enough power to be able to stream, and I'm using Clip Studio Paint.
Okay.
Which I just love as software. It is so good.
So are you using like a stylus to do the drawing, or are you using a mouse?
Using a stylus. That would be, oh god. I've tried drawing with a mouse. It is fun if you want to torment yourself for a while.
See, I'm showing my ignorance of all things computer art related.
Oh no, of course.
It is a subject and a topic that I know nothing about.
Well, I take for granted that the people know a bit of the basics. But yeah, I have a monitor by XP Pen that has fucked me over a few times with random glitches, but it's behavement.
Okay.
It's a quarter the price of the Wacom, which are the fancy ones. So
right.
I can't be too mad because I did cheap out and not buy the $2,000 one.
Well, geez, I mean, often, going and buying the best thing is not the best idea. Sometimes you can get a really, really good deal on something that's perhaps, maybe a couple of spec levels down that'll still do the trick for you. That's very impressive. It really is.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. This has been really fun. Okay, so since we did this for Lope, what are some moments you like from having played? What was the character name again?
Bayrak.
See, the problem is I keep thinking Baymax every time I go to say it.
So his full name is Bayrak Tar. Now, when I was coming up with the character concept, I was thinking a Aarakocra artillerist artificer. And I came up with that idea because I was watching a lot of the footage and things that was coming out of the Russo-Ukrainian war, and the unmanned drones that Ukraine was using to great effect were called Bayraktar drones.
Interesting! I didn't know that.
Yeah, I thought that'll be a cool name. One, that's a cool name for a character, Bayraktar. And I thought I could just make him an Aarakocra artillerist. and he can fly around in the air and shoot shit on the ground. I thought that was very, very clever. But then I decided on a lizard folk instead. I couldn't really tell you why. I couldn't really tell you why I chose the lizard folk. I think I was just a little more interested in them as a species. And yeah, so we was playing through the Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which was not what I thought. I thought it was about dragons, but it's actually about money. Which
Yeah,
was
it's a bank named the Dragon, right?
yeah. Or well, I mean, in the version that we were playing, the currency was, they were gold dragons.
Oh, that's what it is.
Um,
Okay, I have not looked into it deeply. I just
mm,
know that there's a heist.
yeah, yeah. Um, Notable events in Bayrak's life. Well, so being an artificer, Bayrak is very intelligent, more intelligent than most of his family. Had a troubled upbringing. Excuse me, and ran away from home at an early age, and found refuge in a group of traveling accountants. Um, and they sort of raised him, brought him up, taught him the tools of the trade of accountancy. And he then, upon reaching his majority, left them and went to Waterdeep to sort of try and find his fortune, and hooked up with a bunch of players. As with most of my characters, Bayrak is a chaotic good. So being a lizard folk doesn't have a whole lot of respect for rules and laws and all that sort of stuff. Just wants to do the right thing in any given situation. He also is not very wise in terms of stat points. He has a wisdom of 6.
Ooh, that's a low one. That
It's
isn't. That is
it's
not a lot of awareness.
it's not great. So he is incredibly intelligent, very, very book smart, but yeah, not wise at all. There was he idolizes a particular inventor named Grilda. I can't remember her surname off the top of my head, but he found her hideout in Waterdeep. And this was a very formative moment. He did manage, due to his low wisdom, to trigger a booby trap which blew up a mountain.
A mountain.
Yes, he blew up a mountain. Not his fault, not entirely his fault. But he was washed ashore at the feet of some guardsmen and some people who were sort of investigating this terrible event, and asked the question, are you involved with what happened in that mountain? And his response was, "Oh yeah, I did that."
I forgot about the voice. You got me there.
And so he is a suspected terrorist. And whenever anyone brings up the fact that he is known in Waterdeep as a terrorist, he always responds by going, "No, suspected terrorist. Very important distinction." So that's also sort of fueled his disdain for the local authorities. So that's quite important. He has an upcoming encounter with his older Bikno, who is just a nasty piece of work. I mean, look, Bayrak's story is still unfolding. The party has made its way to Chult. We're running a very heavily modified Tomb of Annihilation story. So it's all based in Chult, so that Bayrak is kind of in his element, as it were.
So you switched over from Dragon Heist to Tomb of Annihilation.
Yes. So we finished up Dragon Heist.
Gotcha.
We finished that, and then then the DM said, "Well, we're gonna go to Chult because you guys, the authorities don't really want you in the city anymore." And and so they got sent off to Chult to go and deal with some shenanigans there, which has been quite nice to visit Bayrak's homeland, and meet his frankly insane grandfather. The other thing with Bayrak is he doesn't swear. He
Oh,
he will never use bad language. He instead uses different words, and this is something that I lifted um, entirely from a couple of novels by the game critic Ben Croshaw, who does the zero punctuation game reviews.
okay.
He wrote two. Well, he's written a bunch of books, but he wrote these two. One was called "We'll Save the Galaxy for Cash," and the second one was "We'll Destroy the Galaxy for Food."
Hmm.
The
I remember
story
those
is
being advertised.
yeah, oh, the great books. I highly recommend them. They're good fun. But there's something in there called pilot math. So basically, all the star pilots in the world have been rendered unemployed by the invention of teleportation, and so uh, to help attract tourists and stuff, the moon, which is where most of this takes place, has banned swearing. So the unemployed star pilots have come up with using mathematical terms instead of swear words to show their disdain for the quantum tunneling. You'll get something like you might get a sentence like, "Oh, he's applying doint," which is translated means he's a fucking idiot. So plying
Oh,
being
that's
multiply.
great.
Yeah. So ply as in multiply is the word for fuck, and doint as in decimal point is the word for idiot. Um, so that's how Bayrak swears, and it works kind of nicely in with the accountancy theme. His favorite is probably track, which is a euphemism for shit, which is subtract. Um, so you might get a sentence like, "This is a playing tracky playing doink of a situation, jinx." Um, and that's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun to mess with. And
Yeah, no, that's very cute. I like it.
so far, none of the other characters have ever asked him why he doesn't swear.
Is there a
I,
reason? Are we?
yeah, well, I mean, it was his accountancy upbringing.
Oh, okay.
They wouldn't tolerate foul language, and so he came up with this thing on his own. This thing that I stole entirely from a novel. Um,
I think that's fine to steal. That's
yeah,
just funny.
yeah, it's just fun. And of course, because all the other characters swear. Um, but Bayrak has just been brought up to be proper, I suppose, in a certain term.
You know what? This
Um,
pose fits better now,
I
knowing
think it,
this.
I think it really does. He's a little bit noble, is Bayrak. He's a bit noble. He's a bit maybe even a little bit holier than thou, especially for someone who has made a living ripping people off. Um, but that's just you know characters with flaws. Flaws make characters. Um,
Absolutely.
uh, you know, uh, you know, flaws are the interesting things to play off of for dealing with player characters or NPCs or even the DM. Having a character who's mostly honourable and noble, but won't shirk away from ripping off a small business owner. Um, there's a nice duality there, I think.
I agree. I think it's important to think about what your character can't do more than what they can do as what to define them because the game system's rules are built to tell you what you can do.
Mm.
True limitations beyond just having a low stat. I think that is more of where you're going to find what you can uniquely add.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, it's critical to add those flaws to your character, be it a drinking problem, be it a gambling problem, be it whatever. Come up with something. Maybe fear of the dark or a fear of spiders. Um, my next character is I'm planning to be a blade singer wizard. It was deathly afraid of heights. Um,
Oh,
because
that's fun.
because why not? It probably won't come up all that much, but
Are you sure? Because 5e gives out ways to give people flight on a goddamn platter. So,
that's true, and especially for a wizard, you've got things like Tensor's
ooh,
floating disc. Um, so having a blade singing elf who is absolutely petrified of flying would be quite an entertaining thing to play around with.
I think it's great.
Mm.
It just adds something charming.
Mm. Yes, yes, absolutely. And that charm doesn't have to come out of your race and class decisions. The racing class is just a template. It's just a template for skills. It's not a
Mhm.
template for personality. That
Well,
that is something that is still entirely up to the player to come up with and deal with. Um, because your character's not always going to make the right call, the right decision. Sometimes they might deliberately, as a deliberate choice by you, the player, will make the wrong choice, but it's the right choice for your character. Um, Not that I'm defending the "it's what my character would do" kind of defense.
it's
Um,
sometimes an okay thing to say, but like,
yeah, and
understand whether or not you are hurting other people's ability to have fun when you,
exactly.
because like, regardless of what your character would do, you chose to play the character who would do that. It is still your fault.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's not a defense for being a dick at the table. It's not a defense for just being a murder hobo. That doesn't fly with me.
Mhm.
But if it is perhaps the wrong decision to make for story reasons or something like that, but it is
Yeah,
genuinely something that your character would do as a logical thing, I think go for it. But yeah, it's got to be that you're not hindering the enjoyment of other people. That's the key because you know all RPGs are a cooperative thing. They're not a competitive thing. And for new players, that can be um, a difficult concept to wrap your head around. That it's not all about your character. It's not all about you. It's about your character and their interactions with other people and with the world.
yeah. I I think that that's right. That it's a mindset that's hard for people at first to not get in the frame of mind that what matters is their character doing cool things.
Mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. It's you can be an entirely support based character where your character may not get to do too many cool things,
Oh
but by
yeah.
being there, you can make the other characters in the party do really cool shit.
I
Um,
stand by the controversial opinion that Alchemist is the most powerful class in PF2, but if you play it, you are not going to be the one doing cool things ever.
no, no. You're going to be on the back lines throwing out bombs because I mean, really, the bomber is the kind of the best subclass. The other ones are, eh, in my opinion.
But even
Um,
then, you don't always need to be throwing out bombs because if
hmm,
you are a bomber and something is weak to your bomb, handing the action economy cost off and giving your bombs to your marshals is
yeah.
really effective.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm really interested in the thaumaturge as a class.
Mm,
I think that's a really, really interesting thing for Paizo to come out with.
very flavorful.
Huge, huge amount of flavor in that class, and so unique. I've never come across in all my years of absorbing fantasy literature and that sort of stuff. Um, the yeah, I've never come across something like that who is kind of at heart a charlatan, um, who just sort of twists the world to their will by their use of as many different artifacts as they've gathered up. I think it's fascinating.
I think it's cool, and it's also cool. It feels like you can play it as someone who truly believes this, or someone who's aware that they're basically bullshitting reality.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, I'd probably pick the latter rather than the former because that's a little more in tune with my own personality. But look, just the sheer breadth and depth of character customization that one can do in Pathfinder is mind boggling. It really is.
earlier you mentioned how your personality doesn't come from mechanics, and while I feel like that's still, even in Pathfinder, mostly true, there
Mm.
are ways that Pathfinder allows you to reinforce your personality by the mechanics you choose. Like I
Yes.
played an outwit ranger, and you feel entirely different than a ranger who's relying on skill in combat. Like I was trying to play a nerdy ranger, and you feel it when your abilities come from outwitting and outsmarting your opponent.
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing that I particularly like about um, Pathfinder 2e is that it's ingrained in the mechanics that you can find out some of the stats of your enemy. You
Hmm.
can, you can, and you don't even have to be the investigator class or anything like that. If you've got the right skill, you can recall knowledge and see, and then the DM has to kind of play ball with that and say, well, these are the low saves and this is what they're good at, that sort of stuff. There's nothing like that in fifth edition. There's no real way of learning what you're what you're fighting, what are its weaknesses, what are its strengths, what's
Yeah.
it good at.
It's assumed that a good DM will let knowledge checks work, but again, it goes into what you said at the beginning of the conversation that it's assumed. It's something that is on the DM to figure out and to uh, understand what they think a reasonable role is to make that happen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, and is it insight? Is it a straight intelligence? Is it history? Is it animal handling? There's no codified rules for that. And so when there's no codified rules for that for the players, they're not even going to try because there's nothing in the rules that says that they can. Um, there's nothing in the
The
rules that says that they can't, but that's kind of a different story.
the defense I often see is that with a good DM that doesn't matter and it will happen, but like
Hmm.
I still think you're right that it still disincentivizes trying because if you're in combat and your choice is the attack roll that you know will succeed or the knowledge check that could be meaningless if your DM feels like it,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's hard to want to pick the one that I've never thought about it that way though. That like
Hmm.
it is hard to want to pick the one that you don't know is going to have a chance of doing something important.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, especially when, you've got you've got a bonus action and an action. And if you want to try and find something out about the character and that's going to waste your action, that's a huge hit to your action economy.
It's
Um,
why when I run 5e now, I allow rolling recall knowledge to be a bonus action activity, and I have
mm,
some rules in place for it.
yeah. Yeah, the DM who we're doing Tomb of Annihilation with, he had a really neat way of doing it, um, which is he had Volo turn on a book tour. Excuse me, on a book tour. And so we were able in game to purchase Volo's Guide to Monsters,
Oh, that's
and
very funny.
so and Bayrak got the book, and so often in combat he'll spend a turn furiously flicking through the book trying to find, is this it? No. Is this it? No. It's this one. And will then sort of call out to his allies, try and use strength saves, try and use X or Y. I
That's
thought that was
so clever.
right. I'd never come across that before, and I think that's a fantastic idea.
Oh, me too. I love it.
So one, we got to meet Volo, which was always fun. Was it Volo or
Yeah.
Mordenkainen? I can't remember. I think it was Volo.
I
Um, but these characters are kind of baked into the world, so why not use them?
That's so good. I've never heard of someone doing something like that. I love it.
I mean, it wasn't cheap. It was 500 or 600 gold pieces or something like that. But it was it was a big investment at the time that has paid off a
Ooh.
thousandfold.
Uh, I just saw Magical Nate saying, with Treasure Vault, other alchemists are viable. This is from a while ago. Battle Chef alchemist that cooks meals is going to be fun. Forgot about that
Battleship.
happening.
I like that.
I love the.
Battleship.
I do love a Battle Chef. Remind me, Treasure Vault is that like is Treasure Vault first party or is that the third party developed by the lead developer? Magical Nate will know.
I'm sure he will. I haven't the faintest. Um,
I think
uh,
that's third party developed by the head developer. Oh, it's first party. Holy shit. Okay.
okay.
Battle Chef is first party? Oh my god, I'm excited.
Okay, yeah, that sounds cool. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research on that, I think.
I might have to finally play an alchemist instead of just talking about how good they are.
Oh, alchemists are a lot of fun. They really are. Um, a lot of
I
fun for a support class.
I've played only a few characters. Two of them are rangers because I just have always loved ranger aesthetic. I'm still
Mhm.
blown away by a game making them functional.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the Tasha's revamp of Ranger worked really, really well.
It works well. The problem is I find it limits your playstyle still quite a bit. Like you have to go
Yeah.
with the things you get. Whereas I
Mm.
feel like in Pathfinder, Ranger has flavor working, and it's also just one of the most versatile martials in the game. You can build in so many directions.
I think the mistake personally, the mistake that I think Wizards made with the Ranger was making them so niche. You know, making that favored terrain or favored foe, and if you've built a ranger who is, I don't know, their favorite terrain is the desert, for example, and your campaign isn't set entirely in a desert, well then that's kind of a waste of a really major class feature. um,
Absolutely.
I think that was the error in the original ranger design, but with Tasha's doing that revamp of the class, I think they're much more viable now than they were before.
Yeah. I don't think they're bad. I just think the way they fixed them made them better, but not more fun to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a certain amount of sense. Yeah, yeah,
Whereas
definitely.
I find Ranger is just my absolute favorite PF2 class. I just think they're a blast. I love their
Mm,
abilities. I love the flavor. I
mm.
just love them. They're so good. What good friends.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, look,
I
you're always going to have your favorites. Hey, it doesn't matter what it is.
I think I'm also just like it's something about Rangers just being fun at all for
Mm.
once after having wanted to play one, but finding them so unfun for so long.
I mean, yeah, the Ranger kind of fills a very difficult niche in gameplay because I mean, they're not a full martial, they're not a full spellcaster, and nor are they really a gish either. They
Mhm.
they kind of do a little bit of everything, and I mean, to me, when someone says Ranger, my first thought is always Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, I mean
Um,
he called himself Ranger. The class is built to be him and Legolas.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But I don't think that really comes across. It's kind of difficult. You'd almost want sort of like a survivalist kind of class. Someone who's good with a sword, good with a bow, good at keeping themselves alive in difficult and
And that's
hard
what I
terrains.
feel like PF2 manages because your saves are really good, you have
Mm,
adaptability,
mm,
you are focused on your one opponent that you have benefits against. Like it does feel like a survivalist. And I
yeah.
think that, and part of it is just they got rid of spellcasting so that they could make them competent as a martial.
Yeah, I don't think a ranger needs spells.
No.
I think the fifth edition um, martial caster gap is wide enough already. Um, I think that a ranger doesn't necessarily need access to spells. There's enough spellcasters already. I mean, pure martials. You've got what monk, fighter, barbarian.
And most of those have the option to get magical abilities.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, a monk and their key points. Well, that's just magic under a different kind of umbrella.
Yeah,
Um,
that's magic by another name for sure.
yeah, yeah. I mean, really, and I mean, even barbarian, you can get a wild magic barbarian. So, yeah, there's unless you're going a pure, battle master or champion fighter,
Mhm.
there's really not that many pure
5e's,
martial characters.
and even when you look at the races, almost every race gives you magical abilities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Some
Like
kind of magic.
5e is so saturated. It's one of the highest Magic Fantasy games I've seen.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to say real quick, I thought I was done a while ago, but then I started painting on top of it with a pencil, and I'm really loving what that's doing for this. Like this is
It
going from
looks
a quick thing I threw together as a bonus to like I might like this better.
I think it looks fantastic. I really
I,
do.
I'm shocked at how good he's coming out.
Yeah, yeah. He's come up surprisingly well. Um, yeah, yeah. I'm quite amazed actually that you've really kind of captured Bayrak after knowing really nothing about him at all.
Yeah, and
Um,
unlike the other one, I didn't have weeks to sit and think about what would be a good composition.
it's
And even
fantastic.
then, ended up changing a ton.
No, it's brilliant. It really is. I'm staggered that you were able to just kind of come up with that off the dome. It's amazing. It really is.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like it. This has
Hmm.
been a blast. I've loved getting to hear about your process and how the game works. Like, I think you have one of the more unique views on these games that I've seen, and I think
Oh, thank you.
I part of that comes from your background. Part of it, I think, just comes from the fact that you mentioned only getting into it somewhat recently, like last
Yeah,
few years, right?
yeah, yeah. I've
I,
only
I
been playing tabletop since 2018.
Yeah, I think being more mature when you got into it, your perspective is going to be a little bit different. Like
Mm,
you came in, like I've been playing these games since I was 14. So
mm, mm.
for me, a lot of my earliest opinions are going to be from that era. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
oh,
I guess I've been playing RPGs, but video games for a long time. So, I was familiar with the 3.5 edition rules before I even knew that 3.5 edition existed
oh, because of Knights of the Old Republic.
because of Knights of the Old Republic, from
Yeah,
even things like Baldur's Gate. I'm pretty
yeah,
sure that they were
I
built
think it does.
on
Yeah,
3.5 rules. So even the hack and slash like Diablo and Diablo 2. The concept of hit points and mana and all that sort of stuff. It was all second nature. Um, Although I am very interested to see how Baldur's Gate 3 comes around, being the first game built on the 5th edition rule set.
yeah. I'm so curious because it feels like a rule set that is so much smaller that I don't know how you make a video game out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, I tend to have a rule, and I don't touch early access games because I'd rather play the finished product. So I'm not gonna. I'll look at things for Baldur's Gate 3, but I'm not gonna buy it until it's actually finished. But it'll be very interesting to see how it deals with things like advantage and disadvantage. Um, yeah, it's going to be an
I,
interesting thing to see.
quickly bring up Magical Nate also mentioned that archetypes are cool in Pathfinder because it let them
Yes.
make the Ranger Martial. But if you want the nature magic still, you take Druid Dedication, which I fully agree with, which was
Yes.
honestly my plan for my nerdy Ranger character. But I ended up going Wizard instead and having an Arcane Ranger, and that option felt really cool.
Well, I think the archetype and dedication system is so powerful. You can do just about anything. I mean, of course, there's going to be some builds that are better than others,
Mhm.
but
That's
I mean,
unavoidable.
yeah. Ultimately, who cares? Most things are pretty well balanced. So, if you want to have a barbarian character with an inventor dedication, go for it. What the hell will that look like? I don't know. But it'd be interesting if nothing else.
I also find that in general, mastery in PF2 is more rewarded with being able to do more specific cool things than
Mm.
with being able to do powerful things.
Yes, yes. You don't have, despite the numbers being ridiculous, and that was the thing that got me when I first started playing Pathfinder, was just the
Yeah.
size of the numbers. It's like, what do you mean this guy has a will save of plus 26? That's dumb. But it makes sense because
Yeah.
you start out with a rogue at an armor class of 17 or something like that, and so I thought, oh well, this is just going to end up being a huge power creep fest, and it is, but it isn't.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, it doesn't feel like it is because
yeah,
everyone adds levels to everything. It's actually much harder than 5e because enemies actually scale because of 10 over critting and
yes,
just the fact that everything adds level to everything.
yeah, I do love the critical hit system of PF2E. That 10 over or 10 under.
Mhm.
Having multiple success or failure states for everything is just so good.
Well, because we've all always wanted nat 20s on a skill check to mean something, and they
Of
found a
course.
way to make it work. Where
Yeah,
there's a reason a master doesn't fumble. It's because they can take assurance and that other skill feat that turns critical failures into failures, which
yeah.
was the big like dissonance with trying to make natural 20s and natural ones on skill checks work.
Yeah, and I mean, natural 20s and natural ones, even in combat at a high level, doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's why I never use critical fumbles when I'm game mastering. I mean, if you get a one on combat, you miss. You're not going to fumble. You're not going to drop your weapon. None of
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But by the same token, I also wasn't a fan of how fifth edition runs its critical hits either, because just adding one more damage die, it's kind of bullshit.
Uh,
You know,
unless you're playing a paladin or a rogue, and then crits are insane, or barbarian, they add a bone. But like, yeah,
they do, they
the
do.
the fact that you add like trying to bounce. I was bouncing for a while between PF1, where it's like you double your base dice and the bonus, but not extra dice, and then 5e, where you don't double the bonus, you double the base die and the bonus dice, but not the. But it's
Yeah,
I couldn't even get through that without getting confused.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
And
look,
then PF2 just went double it all. I don't know. Whatever.
and that's the rule that I run for my fifth edition table, is that if you get a crit, roll all your damage and then double it,
Oh
because
God, I should switch. It's so much better.
yeah, because a critical hit to me should feel like a critical hit. Yes, it does have some downsides, like you say, for a rogue in particular, using sneak attack. Then you can have your level 5 rogue dealing like 80 damage or something. So it's
I think you may have missed something though, because 5e you do actually double extra dice, so rogue sneak attack is supposed to be doubled.
oh really
Yep.
interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. I didn't
It's
know
extra dice get doubled, just not the bonus. It's insane. It's the dumbest decision because it's so unintuitive.
that. It really is, and so that's why I thought just fuck it,
Yeah,
just roll everything and just double it.
just double it.
Makes
It's
it
better.
Yeah, yeah. It makes it easy. It makes it quick. It does make using D&D Beyond and their dice roller a little more difficult, but
Yeah.
I run my games via Foundry as a virtual tabletop anyway, and people use physical dice, so it's simple enough.
Uh, I think I'm about done here. Is there anything you want to touch on before we say goodbye for today?
No, man, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed myself.
I have as well. I really like how both of these came together.
They both look amazing, and they are going to look fantastic on my office wall. I'll make sure that I'll take a picture on Monday morning, and I'll put it in the Discord so you can see. I'll have 4 or 5 pictures up there now because they look incredible.
Glad you think so, and I'm excited to see what that looks like. Thanks everyone for watching. Lovely hanging out with y'all, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. I've had a ton of fun talking to you. I love that I got to talk to a Kiwi right after talking to an Aussie, learning a little bit about both countries, and this was just. I love your perspective. I love your perspective on characters and how the voice is how you find the character. I think it's so cool to see. Like, it makes so much sense if you come from a performance background that's where you find it.
Thank you so much. I've had an absolute blast on a rainy and slightly miserable Sunday afternoon. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you again. Have an awesome night. I think that's fine to steal. That's just funny.